Reverend Daniel O'Connell. As a Unitarian Universalist minister, Daniel served churches in Danbury, Connecticut, St. Louis, Missouri, and Houston, Texas. He served on various regional and national denominational boards with distinction. We are blessed by the fact that now Daniel enjoys occasional preaching and is a frequent guest to our fellowship and always leaves us with something to think about. Please join me in welcoming Reverend Daniel O'Connell.
Good morning. It is good to be back here with you again. It's like every month now, so that's pretty cool. So interdependence. So you would think that after 22 years of preaching about Unitarian Universalism, I would have a couple of sermons about interdependence in the bag, but you would be wrong. Interdependence. So as a seminary student and also growing up UU, I was frequently asked, you know what do you believe, right? And so this is a particular question because almost any answer I begin to say sounds like I'm making it up on the spot, right? And if you ask me in a week, I'm going to give you a different answer. But the hymnal is really handy because when you open it up, you can see right there that for the last 40 years, which is a really long time for Unitarian Universalists to do anything, we've had this gray book. And it has good answers to the important questions, like, well, what is contemporary Unitarian Universalism based on? What do y'all believe? Well, it's right in here. So the UU principles and sources are on the first few pages. And right there towards the bottom, you can read respect for the interdependent web of all existence, of which we are a part, like a part of, not apart from. That's an important part. So it sounds like an idea that we should all really rally around. Respect for the interdependent web, respect nature, respect others, respect ourselves. Kind of seems like a no-brainer. Don't all religions teach respect? Doesn't everybody believe in respect? Well, if you go a little deeper towards the bottom of the page, we read, grateful for the religious pluralism which enriches our faith. So wait a minute. Pluralism? Pluralism is a belief in difference, a philosophy supporting diversity, religious tolerance, and multiculturalism. Okay, now you're going to get in some arguments with people right there. It's controversial. I mean, it may not be controversial to you, but it is out in society because it favors diversity over homogeneity. We, as a group, tend to like the fact that there are different races, different genders, different gender identities, different sexual orientations, and some people hate that. They just hate it. They didn't ask for it. They did not ask for it. And yet, they don't want it. They don't want to see it. They don't want to hear it. They prefer that everyone conform to the system that they believe in, which of course is the correct system. It's kind of like when you're driving down the highway on 45. I am going the correct speed. Everybody else is either going too fast or too slow, right? And so that's intolerance. And religious pluralism celebrates the fact that there are a lot of religions all around us all the time. Some people, that drives them crazy, their blood pressure goes up. We enjoy it. It ennobles and enriches our faith. Have you ever seen one of those coexist bumper stickers? I love those. I mean, I didn't love them at first, but then when I really thought about it, I loved them. The sticker seems to spell out the word coexist using a series of religious symbols. So the Islamic crescent looks like the letter C, the O is a peace sign, and Om from Hinduism and Buddhism fills in for the letter X, and so on. It is a message of peace and acceptance in just a bumper sticker. And that message of peaceful acceptance and celebrating diversity is so much more than tolerance. Intolerance means you will not put up with something. Those heathens must convert or be killed. Tolerance, well, that's a step up. Well, I guess it's okay that those people who don't look like me and are not part of my religion, those people, I guess it's okay that they can live in a part of town I'm never even going to visit anyway. I guess I can put up with just the idea that they're going to be there. Intolerance, not putting up with. Tolerance, I'll put up with it. It's a pretty clear step from one to the other, but pluralism, actually celebrating difference, that's a difference that might scare us, at least at first. It's not simple. It's not quick to go from, I'm going to put up with it, to I'm going to invite it, I'm going to celebrate it, I'm going to enjoy it. There is a path from declaring yourself as being stubbornly independent, picking yourself up by your bootstraps, to embracing interdependence. And that path, I mean, it's straightforward, but it's not easy. At least it hasn't been easy for me. That path is compassion. Now, I grew up without a lot of compassionate role models. I, of course, didn't realize it at the time. There are things you grow up with as a kid, and you don't realize. You get to college, all of a sudden, wow, everybody's dad doesn't drink a six-pack every night? What else is going to be different, right? I grew up without a lot of compassion, didn't realize it, and when I did realize I was not that compassionate, I became kind of, well, ashamed of myself, really. One day, many years ago, in a J.C. Penney, that's a department store in a shopping mall, my then 60-year-old mother slipped, fell straight down on her rear end with a whoops and a thud, and for just a second, her arms and legs were up in the air for a frozen moment. And my thought, unbidden at the time, was, how clumsy. Is she going to get up, like, soon? I mean, it was just in my head. And then after another long second, she was back up on her feet, and she was wincing a little, saying something I didn't quite catch. And it occurred to me a few moments later that I had not immediately walked over to help her out. I had not asked if she was okay. I was only concerned about how soon we could get back to shopping. I was only concerned that she might be, or we together, were somehow creating a scene for the other shoppers. I was in the moment concerned that she might embarrass me in front of strangers I would never see again. What a bizarre set of thoughts. I was not seeing her in her full humanity, more like a distraction in my day. There was no real interdependence with us. And this was my mother, the one who would tell me every birthday growing up about how I had red hair and she was taking me home from the hospital and they didn't have children's seats back then, and how it was cold in Illinois, the same story. This is my mother. This is the person who gave me birth. I was in the world because of her, and now she's an embarrassment. I realized this later and felt guilty, and I wondered, well, why? Why did I not have any compassion for her in that moment? I wasn't angry. I wasn't irritated with her or anyone else. I wasn't sleep deprived. I felt perfectly fine. There didn't seem to be any excuse at all why I couldn't have a shred of compassion for my own mother. And as a young adult, after this incident, I came to realize, well, I guess I really am not very compassionate. And I realized I wanted to be a better human being. Now, I knew other people who were compassionate, but when I stopped to think about it, I guess I had assumed that the world is a rough and tough place, and that there are those softies out there. And then there's more realistic people like me. And I began to feel developing compassion was a skill I was going to have to learn, like learning to speak Spanish or something. Now, because we draw on a variety of sources, it's pretty easy to find stuff. I mean, the Dalai Lama makes it sound really straightforward, real simple, 2 steps. If you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. Okay, so if I'm going to learn to be compassionate, then I'm also maybe going to be able to make people around me feel happy, and I'll myself feel happier. Why did I not start this earlier? Be compassionate, be happy, very simple, and yet I bet you are a busy person. You have a busy life. You have volunteer opportunities like we heard about just a little while ago, probably job opportunities. You may even have friends and family who want some of your time, they want some of you. And you might feel like, You don't have a lot of time to be compassionate to everyone because in your heart of hearts, you kind of feel like you don't actually have enough time for yourself. And your life may be hard, especially right now. You know, compassion is a verb, it's an activity, and if you're spending your time being compassionate, maybe you're not spending your time doing or being other worthy things. And can you really be compassionate to everyone? I mean, come on. Maybe there are some people that don't deserve compassion. And maybe there are some that do, and some not so much, and it's probably pretty easy to feel sympathy and compassion for victims. Crime victims, natural disaster victims, accident victims, war victims, like we heard this morning. We can feel compassion for strangers washed out of their homes during or after a hurricane. Other people, well, maybe. Maybe they created the mess that they're in. And do we really want to enable that? Or maybe they have done some evil acts, and they certainly do not deserve compassion. And what about people we really, really don't like? What about Nazis? What about white supremacists? What about, I don't know, a politician we would just really wish would just get up and leave the country, never to be heard from again? You might have somebody in mind. I don't know. So compassion isn't necessarily so straightforward once you start really thinking about it, at least not for me. You may be more spiritually advanced. So Sylvia Borstein, who is a Buddhist teacher, writes, I don't need to like everyone. I can even dislike or disapprove or feel moved to try and stop people from doing harmful things. I just want to not wish them ill. She writes, I can see people not as enemies, but as adversaries. This is what gets at what I think we mean by the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Our first principle is that we promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Notice, it does not say that everyone is good. It says that even people we might consider evil have an inherent worth. Well, do I really want to hear that? Do I really want to accept that? Am I going to live my life differently if I hear that and accept that even people I consider evil have an inherent worth? And of course, we don't really know everything about anyone, including ourselves. As the poet Longfellow puts it, if we could read the secret history of our enemies, we would find in each person's life sorrow and suffering enough to disarm all our hostility. And so we are called to treat everyone, even our adversaries, as the Buddhist teacher puts it, we are called to treat even our adversaries with dignity. My standing around after my mom went rear end down in the middle of J.C. Penney's in the shopping mall was not compassionate. It wasn't even treating her with dignity. And it didn't seem strange at that time to simply stand around after she'd taken the fall. It didn't seem strange at the time, but it sure seems strange now. My lack of compassion didn't just stop with my mother, of course. I had a lack of compassion for myself. And it seemed like just yet another way as a young adult I was discovering how I didn't measure up in the world. So I wasn't very compassionate toward my mother, and later I judged myself harshly, and then even more harshly, and I came to the conclusion that I was a pretty worthless human being. He just stood there while his 60-year-old mother slipped and landed on her butt in the middle of a store. He just stood there like he had been inconvenienced. What a jerk. The truth is, we are all going to fall short of who we want to be, of our goals, our ideals. So here's a question for you. When, not if, but when you mess up, can you just stop judging yourself for a few minutes? Okay, you tried a diet, you fell off. Okay, that happens. Can you treat yourself with the same kindness and compassion you would show to a good friend? There can be a serious disconnect between compassion we have for other people and compassion we have for ourselves. I remember coming across love your neighbor as yourself as an adult and thinking, well, that's not very good. I think I should treat my neighbor better than I treat myself, because if I love my neighbor the way I love myself, that's not a great love. That's not even up to my standards. And if you judge somebody by one set of standards and yourself by another, well, that's not interdependence. That's separation. That's isolation. And not only are you separating and isolating yourself, you're separating and isolating them. That is intolerance. Now, you may worry that if you're not hard on yourself, you'll just become lazy and selfish. But on the other hand, will beating yourself up all the time make you a better person? No. I saw a poster that said, be nice to yourself. It's hard to be happy when someone's mean to you all the time. And the way out of this, really, compassion has to begin with yourself. Self-compassion is through self-kindness and mindfulness. So self-kindness is just try and treat somebody. You know, if you have a good friend and they're going through a patch, you try to be a good friend to them. And if you screw up or do something, then just for a moment sort of frame it, well, how can I be a good friend to myself just in that moment? Self-kindness is treating others as we would treat others when they have a difficult moment. You are only human. Me too. We are wonderfully and fearfully made, you and me both. Humans make mistakes, all kinds. Good mistakes, bad mistakes, wise mistakes occasionally, and of course the stupid mistakes. It's an inevitable part of the human experience. Mindfulness. So one of the things that means is taking a step back mentally and getting the big picture. So the way that I got at this concept was, imagine that you're on a dance floor, and imagine that around the dance floor there's a balcony. So when you're on the dance floor, you're seeing all the stuff, you're moving, and then there's music, and you're in that moment, and that is your entire world right there. But let's say that you leave the dance floor and you go up on the balcony, and now you're looking at all the dancers that are on the floor. You have a different perspective. Same things are happening, but you're seeing it from a different perspective. So if you can do that, that is getting a bigger picture of what's going on all around you in the moment. And it also helps a lot with something that I have a tendency to do on occasion, which is called catastrophizing. It means imagining things are worse than they are, or that the future will inevitably hold whatever the worst case scenario is. I mean, the news is full of catastrophizing. This is the worst case scenario, this is what's going to happen. Now, because of some childhood trauma at a young age, I developed the idea that if I just thought about and anticipated a worst case scenario, that it would somehow prepare me. But all it did was make me live a misery which probably wasn't going to happen. But the thought in my childhood brain was that if somehow I imagined the worst case scenario and really felt it, then when the worst thing happened, I wouldn't feel so bad, which of course doesn't work either. Fortunately, as the 17th century philosopher Montaigne once said, my life has been filled with terrible misfortunes, most of which never happened. So self-compassion helps. Self-compassion can provide a reality check to catastrophizing. Even now, some mornings, I don't even have to look at the clock. I know it's around 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and I am imagining the worst case scenario, and I practice mindfulness. And it usually helps. It usually helps. I can step back emotionally. I can say, how am I feeling right now? And thinking back about my mother, I could be kind to myself and my own mother, and wouldn't that, in fact, make things better? That's how mindfulness can work for me. It can be an interruption. It pauses my knee-jerk reaction so I can be mindful, so I can be aware, so I can be on the dance floor and then in the balcony and back again and breathe. You can be mindful at any time. You can imagine yourself right now in this moment, looking down on your body, here in this chair. You've been sitting here quietly, reflecting on the words and music. Maybe you haven't noticed the sensation of your feet in your shoes on the floor, the temperature of the room, the feeling of being in this room with all these people on Zoom, the feeling of how your hands are placed. You are now aware of how your hands are placed. This is mindfulness. This is how you can begin to take an outsider's perspective on your own experience. This can be very helpful when we get too much down on ourselves, when we get mean with ourselves. Many years after my mother fell down at the J.C. Penney's, I apologized to her for my lack of compassion. But by then, she saw me as a more compassionate person, which for her was apology enough. She was compassionate toward my long ago complete lack of compassion. So first, be kind to yourself. It's way easier to be kind to other people if you start by being kind to yourself. Remember, we are only human. Be kind to yourself and to others, even if you feel in the moment they maybe don't deserve your kindness. Because when you are kind to yourself, when you are kind to others, you will feel grateful. You will feel grateful for diversity and pluralism, and you will feel a deep, deep gratitude at being alive in this glorious, awesome, interdependent web of all existence, of which you are a part, and you, and you, and you, and you, and yes, even you and me are a part. Amen.